Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone to Microsoft Research. My name is Kim Ricketts and I manage, along with Kirsten Wiley, the Microsoft Research Visiting Speaker Series. I want to let everyone know that we now have the next 6 weeks of authors up on a new MSR SharePoint site. If everyone is on the alias right now, I will be able to shoot you the link to that so you can see them. But I can verbally tell you the next few weeks are pretty exciting. Next week we have Dr. Steven Pinker here. We have Oliver Sacks coming in October. We have co-founders of Architects for Humanity, Cameron Sinclair and Kate Storr coming. Mark J. Penn, who's a trend watcher and advisor to Senator Clinton, and also to Gates and Ballmer. We have innovation expert John Kao and Fake Steve Jobs, the blogger that writes the wonderful Fake Steve Jobs column. I hope I don't get in trouble for that one. And the Sims inventor Will Wright will be joining us in November too. So lots of great people coming. Put it on your calendars, go to the SharePoint site as soon as I send it to you, and plan to come. Today, however, I'm very pleased to welcome Ian Ayers here to discuss his work on data mining and his latest book, SuperCrunchers, Why Thinking by Numbers is the New Way to Be Smart. Of course, we here at Microsoft Research have long thought that thinking by numbers was the way to be smart. So thank goodness you've written this book to kind of prove it to everybody. We believe in data here at Microsoft, and it turns out after reading your book that there are very good reasons for that. And now that we can gather huge amounts of data for the first time in human history, we can analyze this data and make predictions that are measurably better than experts or intuition alone. And so we are, yes, it seems, moving to that better world through science future, but there are some troubling aspects to this as well. For there are issues. Human beings still play a role in the algorithm process, as was clear to me the other day when I went on Amazon and the thing comes up, says if you're interested in that, you might be interested in this, and I was looking at a book and they said if you're interested in this book, you might be interested in underwear. So clearly it doesn't always work, but if humans are entirely written out of the equation, what does that mean for our society and our laws as well? So Ian Ayers is here from Yale Law School to talk to us about supercrunchers and the perils and the promise of number crunching. Please welcome him.
Hi, thanks a lot for coming out. Thanks for inviting me. I approach this talk with a great deal of humility. It's Microsoft and companies like it that have really inspired me, and especially in this research division. You are the cutting edge. You know much more about predictive algorithms than I do, and so I'd love to learn from you. But with that, let me throw in a little bit of my thoughts on supercrunching.
I know beyond a shadow of a doubt the one woman that I've searched for my entire life, I found.
The person I found in Lance is incredible. eHarmony helped me find the love of my life.
At eHarmony.com, we match you based on the deep dimensions of compatibility, essential for a meaningful relationship.
And without any question, I will love you for the rest of my life. And so I could not be happier than at any point to be able to ask you if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife.
Now, can anybody predict how she's going to respond? eHarmony, we've seen these commercials. They flood the market with them. My claim is that eHarmony really represents a very different type of matching service, a kind of new wisdom of the crowds. In the old wisdom of crowds, which is still pretty new itself, you'd ask people what they thought, and people can make much better guesses of how many jelly beans are in the jar. eHarmony does something different that has all to do with predictive algorithms. Instead of asking you who you want to go out with, eHarmony puts much, much less weight on that than traditional dating services, and they instead, as the commercial quickly said, they give you a personality test. They measure 29 different dimensions of your personality, and then they go out and run regressions to find out which personality types do well together in marriage. And they will match you with people that you wouldn't have thought you'd do well with. They don't care so much about who you think you'll love. They let the numbers do it. That's a different kind of, that's different than the wisdom of crowds or even your personal preferences. Pandora.com does another kind of predictive algorithm. They look at the structure of songs, and this works very well for me or for my kids. You put in that you like Bruce Springsteen, and a geek like me finds a song by the Bodines. I think this is Idaho that I like. So what's going on here? These are both two of hundreds of examples that I might have thrown up of the rise of database decision making. You guys already know a lot about this. Statistical analysis is not just being done, but it's impacting real world decisions. And a central claim here is that these super crunchers are making better decisions than traditional experts. I'm going to be emphasizing regressions and randomizations. I'm really scared to throw regressions up here because while I'm really going to be talking a lot about regressions versus human predictions, there is a big field out here that you guys know a lot more about, is regressions. It's an open question about regression versus other predictive algorithms, which include, but is not limited to, neural network analysis and Bayesian update and all kinds of predictive algorithms. And one of the exciting things to figure out is under what circumstances regressions do better than other types of predictive algorithms. And I'll say a little bit more about that, but my big claim is when you see regressions, I'm talking about the whole world of statistical predictions, and the big claim is that they're doing better than the traditional human experts. And traditional human experts are losing out in this competition. So what's new about super crunchings? Again, this is hardly new to you guys. I talk about size, speed, and scale. I'm trying to let other people know that they need to start thinking about terabytes and petabytes instead of gigabytes, that these are coming to a hard drive near you very soon. And the speed and the scale of the impact is also something that instead of having a study done and waiting 6 months or a year to start having an impact, these are having large impacts very, very quickly in field after field. Most of you in this audience will already know something about regressions or know a lot about it. The regression approach is going to estimate weights on an equation for underlying influencers. It tries to figure out what causes what. And here is one of my favorite examples. This is Orley Ashenfelter. He's one of the great statistical economists out there. And he went out and ran a regression, very simple regression, trying to predict the quality of Bordeaux wine. And here are the actual coefficients that he found. And the big idea here is Bordeaux wines you can't actually drink for several months. And even when you get your first drink, it's really horrid. But people like this guy Parker will come out and do it, and then they will pronounce on the quality. Orley, on the basis of just 3 variables, came up with more accurate predictions before anybody ever even made the initial tasting. And one of the iron laws is that the old guard does not walk away quietly. They always resist losing their discretion, losing their power. Robert Parker, the god of wine tasting, says quite negative things about Orley. But Orley has done quite well if you look at what happens. By the way, one of the things that you can see from this is look at the impact of having as the average growing temperature goes up, we have a plus coefficient on this. So having a hotter harvesting average growing temperature improves the quality of wine. It lets the grapes ripen. And a convenient truth is that the Bordeaux have been really great in the last decade because of global warming. So anyway, what's going on? This idea of predicting the future with regressions, it is behind not just Orley's wine predictions and eHarmony and Pandora's, but these statistical equations are being used in evidence-based medicine, credit scoring prediction. Of course, Michael Lewis's Moneyball showed how they were being used in sports. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of where they're being used. And here let me speak a little bit more technically here. I think that the general public doesn't understand that one of the coolest things about regressions is that the very statistical process that produces a prediction simultaneously gives you an estimate of that prediction's precision. If there's not good historical data, it will give you a prediction but have a wide confidence interval. It won't be very confident in it. If it has a lot of data, it'll be tighter. And one of the distinguishing characteristics between regression predictions and some statistical predictive algorithms is that at least at the moment, some of these alternative predictive algorithms don't give confidence intervals. But they could. It would be easy to bootstrap, to do some simulations and try to bootstrap confidence intervals. Or this is a question I'd love to get back from you. When you guys use predictive algorithms, are you producing confidence intervals around them? Because it seems to me that there's important place for improving to get some more precision estimates along with this. And by the way, when I say what's the value of confidence intervals, I love Faircast, which crunches terabytes of data to tell you whether the stuff is going up or down. Here is a flight from New York to Los Angeles. They predict it's going down, and they tell you that their confidence is more than 80% of the time. They tell you that right on the website, and they'll even stand behind their prediction by offering you insurance on it. So that's a beautiful example of super crunching on the consumer side. The second thing that I'm even more obsessed by is the rise of randomized trials, and I just think there's tons more places this can be used in business and in government and lots of other places in our life. It's of course the gold standard of drug testing is to do randomized trials, and it's the great powers. It gives you a very strong control group, yet suddenly you know that the control and the treated group are going to be statistically similar by the law of large numbers. And it's also powerfully complements regressions. When historical data runs out, when you don't have enough to test something using regression or predictive algorithms, you can proactively go out and create your own data. And on the internet, it's particularly powerful because the cost of randomized trials on the internet starts going down to zero. You can do a lot more randomized trials and have a reaction in not in days but in hours and even minutes. Here is an example from Offermatica of a randomized trial. Here are two different graphic elements, and Tyler, did I remember your name right? Tyler, which of these, the top image or the low image, do you think is more attractive?
The low image.
Me too. Okay, and graphic designers tend to like the lower image, but when they did a randomized trial, the upper image produced more revenue, and that's a lot of money. And we need to take away some of the discretionary power of graphic designers and just do ongoing randomized tests to find out what works. And since you don't have to just rely on any single test 20 or 30 things. You can get the reaction so quickly. And it is so transparently powerful. It's just a comparison of averages, really. There's fancier stuff using the Takaguchi method and other things where you can simultaneously test multiple elements. But unlike regressions, which often get down to a point of trust me statistics where you really wonder whether the people did it right, these randomized trials have great power. And I want to emphasize that this is not just about marketing, not just about the internet. Randomized testing can help you prove all kinds of things and here's an example in the HR environment. You could test whether commitment bonds help employees quit smoking or lose weight. Have employees put in some of their own money, and if they don't lose weight, it goes to a charity of their choice. And Dean Carlin has used randomized trials of commitment bonds to show that they really are effective in the Philippines on no smoking campaigns. They took a group of people that were interested in quitting smoking, flipped some coins, half of them they made available the opportunity to put your money into a commitment bond. Half the people they didn't, and since it's randomized, those two things are statistically equivalent groups, and you can just see the impact. The group that didn't have the commitment bonds, they tried to quit, but like most people, they failed, 5% success rate. The people that put some of their own money at risk had a 40% success rate, which is not a silver bullet, but it's very hard to get 40% success rates on smoking. So this is really exciting to me. Dean and I would love to work with Microsoft or other people. We're starting a company that we're not going to charge anything on, just to try to see if we can do some randomized trials of commitment bonds, launching it January 1st in time for New Year's resolution, see if we can get people to lose. And by the way, I'm not just a founder of this company. I'm self-experiment. I put $26,000 at risk to safely lose weight and keep it off. I started the year at 205, and this is my actual weight. I have money at risk if I ever go above this line. And so this is a little bit of self-empiricism. So it worked in the Philippines on smoking. It's working on me. But this isn't enough. It'd be really great to do randomized studies to see whether you can help your employees. And it might not work in a randomized trial, but let's put stuff to the test. And in some ways, there is randomized stuff happening in business, certainly on the internet, but governments are actually ahead of business in the randomization game. There have been hundreds of randomized policy studies on all kinds of things. The impact of randomly giving people housing vouchers to escape poverty, living in poor neighborhoods. What's the impact of an audit threat? You do a randomized study. The very powerful ideas about the impact of giving job search training. But what I'd like to spend just a couple minutes talking about is Mexico's progressive system, which was is my nomination for the most important randomized policy study that's ever been done. And the progressive program is a contingent cash program, contingent cash and food, $12 of monthly food supplement if you and your family go to have some medical treatment, go for checkups. And also there was some contingent cash if your children attend school more than 85% of the time. And by the way, this was only given to mothers. They followed some other statistical evidence that suggests that mothers were more faithful in using the food and the money on their kids than fathers. And they ran around a very powerful randomized experiment. They divided 506 villages into treatment and control groups. And this was a total of 24,000 poor households in these villages. Half the villages they gave the contingent cash stuff to, half they didn't, and then they just calculated the averages. And what happened? The progressive boys went to school 10% more, the girls 20% more, serious illness, anemia was down, and this to me is just what's amazing. In 3 years, the average height of the kids in the progressive villages was a centimeter taller. And a centimeter in that time, that's just humongous as far as a proxy for health. Taller kids growing faster means that something important is happening. And this has just had a huge impact. In 2001, Mexico expanded it nationwide to 2 million of their poor families, a $2.6 billion annual budget because of this randomized experiment. And now progressive-like grants, contingent cash grants, have been adopted in 30 other countries around the world, all because of this powerful transplantation. There's the limits for public policy is just everywhere. You know, we have Sarbanes-Oxley. I'm also a law professor. You can have randomized law on the way in, or we have Sarbanes-Oxley. Does it really work? What if we ran a little experiment where at random we took 5 or 10% of the companies and let them have 5 years off without Sarbanes-Oxley? Okay, what would happen? Would their share price go up, down? We could actually find out whether laws work with a very powerful randomization method. So it can be, this is something that these tests really allow you to find out a lot more of what works. And by the way, randomization starts at home. Using a Google AdWords experiment, I did a randomized study of what book title I should have. I started off, Tyler, thinking, doesn't the end of intuition sound like a great book title? Sure, that's what I thought. I loved it. It's powerful, kind of poetic, and my editor said, no, SuperCrunchers is better. We thought about it. I ran a randomized trial, and this had a 63% higher click-through rate. So I'm very happy to let a kind of super crunching decide the title of this book. And so all this super crunching is going on. The big theme here is I want to say there have now been hundreds of studies that try to test whether traditional experts do better than statistical prediction. And let me tell you about one of my favorites and then summarize the whole thing. In 2002, they ran a natural experiment on who could predict the votes of Supreme Court justices for the entire term. And in one corner, they collected 83 experts who were not just lawyers, but a lot of them were former clerks on the U.S. Supreme Court. And they were chaired professors. These were luminaries. And on the other side, they had a statistical model that had 6 variables. None of the variables, this is incredibly crude, none of the variables actually talked about the issue in the case. These are instead, did the case come out of California's Ninth Circuit? Was the government a party? And what happens? The model wins. Model predicted 75% of the court's decisions versus 59% for the experts, particularly effective at getting the swing votes of Justice O'Connor and Kennedy. By the way, just to give you an idea of the algorithm, this is the algorithm for Justice O'Connor. You start here. You guys have seen these algorithm boxes. Is the lower court decision liberal? Then this algorithm says she's going to reverse. Okay? If it's not liberal, then it's slightly more complicated. This is what beat out the experts. Okay? And the experts, and this is important because, well, I'll get to it just in a second. How could this be? How could something that clearly is leaving out relevant information still win out? And by the way, this is not anomalous. I'm not cherry picking here. Well, it's a beautiful extreme example. But when in these hundreds of studies, about 6% of the time, the humans do a statistically better job. The rest of the time, I guess that's 94% of the time, it's split between no difference between the experts and the statistics, and half the time when the statistics does statistically significantly better at prediction. So why is it that humans are doing so badly relative to the machines? Well, the big thing is we don't assign the right weights to underlying causal factors. We fall in love with certain causal weights and we ignore other ones. So these experts, they keep forgetting, just was the lower court opinion liberal or conservative? Did it come out of the Ninth Circuit? Those things are really important, and they put too little weight because they think, oh, I'm an expert, I know about this little area of law, that's going to be really important. It's not as important as they think it is. But they fall in love with their expertise. And secondly, we humans are damnably overconfident. And this has been shown over and over. We either won't confront the precision, or when we ask people to tell the precision, give me a 90% confidence range of when Mozart died, people are overconfident. They don't get it right 90% of the time. And what's particularly, I guess this is one of my big surprises from writing this book, is that the more complicated the problem, the worse humans do relative to statistics. we tend to think, oh, this is a really complicated issue. We need to bring in the expert who's worked on this for 20 years. But I claim that whenever you have more than 5, certainly more than 10 causal factors, stay away from the humans, okay? Because they will not weight those causal factors appropriately. So the good news is, of course, that there's still important stuff for us to do, and particularly hypothesize. You still need to have somebody that comes up with the initial hunches. I'm a big fan of Aaron Fink, a urologist from California, who was just a zealot in favor of circumcision. And this is the kind of guy that would self-publish his own books, and he'd make claims that circumcision would help clear your acne. I think he actually said that, okay? Everything it was good for. You know this kind of person. But he published a letter to the editor in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1988, where he hypothesized that circumcision would reduce the infectivity of AIDS. And he had a reason for it. He thought that something about the skin cells on the prepuce, I think, which is the foreskin, was more susceptible to AIDS infestation. And it took a decade for an accumulation of statistical information, but just in the last 12 months, 2 randomized studies closed down early, testing this hypothesis because it was so powerful, the impact on reducing infectivity. And now the Gates Foundation is thinking about doing a big subsidization of voluntary circumcision in Africa to save. And so this guy Aaron Finks, crazy though he was, is going to be responsible for saving tens of thousands of lives. So there's still a very important place for us in the future. And the last set of things that I want to talk about, so why is it so important? Well, it affects us as workers, as consumers, as citizens. And a big theme is that line peripheral employees are losing their discretion. Loan officers used to have a lot of discretion on who gets loans. Now they're basically glorified secretaries. They enter in your data and the computer tells you who gets things, who gets a loan or not. Maybe it's even tied to outsourcing, because once you have empirically tested scripts, you can have people sitting in other countries that read those scripts for you. So here is an example. Let's see if this thing... What we're hearing here is one of the more controversial examples of losing discretion in education. This is direct instruction. And you're hearing a primary teacher teaching reading with direction instruction, and it's completely scripted. The teacher has no discretion, and if you listen, she'll repeat the same things over and over. Get ready.
What word?
What word? Get ready. Imagine how terrible it would be to be a teacher under this system, right? Well, it turns out that many of us have heard this before, lightly in the background. Here it is again, this scene that we have just heard. And it was recorded on September 11th. This is where Bush was when the second plane hit the World Trade Tower. And the reason he was here is because of No Child Left Behind, which mandates educational methods that are statistically proven. And direct instruction is very controversial, but it has huge data behind it. Project Follow Through followed 79,000 low-income school children for over 20 years, and it beat 16 other methods. It was first in reading, first in math, first in language. I mean, it is, and it gets even better. It's especially effective for kids who are reading below grade. It's especially effective for economically disadvantaged kids. And this is the kind of hidden dirty little secret. It's really effective if you have mediocre teachers. If you have because their quality doesn't matter as much. They're just following a script. So but there's a real question here about would we want to ourselves live in this world. There's a tension between whether we want to help kids learn or whether we want to help human flourishing. Now, by the way, teachers often react very negatively at the beginning of this. There are a couple things that make some teachers actually like direct instruction. One, there's no prep. You just walk in and you can do your job, so it's very easy. But secondly, teachers that actually love to see their kids learn, they suddenly see that kids are able to do things that they never could get them to do. It's a little bit frustrating when you try to get kids to learn to read for a year and they still can't read. And now suddenly they can read sentences at the end of a year, and some teachers who thought they wouldn't like it end up taking an ownership of it. Secondly, so that it impacts us importantly as workers. It impacts us as consumers. Here's a little bit controversial point. Harris is in the business of predicting pain points of individualized consumers. And this is in some ways the dark side of customer relationship management. Gary Loveman and I have one thing in common, that we both got a PhD in economics from MIT. Sadly, it ends there because he's become the CEO of Harris, and he's really big into making statistical predictions. So he set up this loyalty card program for frequent gamblers, and they have great data on pull-by-pull slot machine winnings and losses, and they have mashed that together with dozens of other demographic variables, and they go out and they predict your pain point, how much you can lose at a setting and still come back for more. And they're keeping track of your wins and losses. As somebody gets close, let's say your pain point was $720. If you get close to that, they can't change the odds on the machine, but they'll send out a luck ambassador who might tap you on the shoulder and say, oh, we notice you like our steakhouse. Here's a free steak dinner, okay, for you and your spouse. Go have fun. You don't hit your stake point. You don't hit your pain point, and you're much more likely to come back to Harris again and lose in the future. And this is and so what to think about it? In some ways, it's helping improve the experience. I tend to help, especially like super crunching on quality. It helps consumers get products and services they want. I'm a little bit scared when they're super crunching on price. They'll start figuring out your pain point. And Harris is also kind of at this new world of happiness discrimination. A lot of my examples are about firms. One way to think about firms are trying to predict customer happiness. But in this new world, eHarmony is trying to predict your happiness. But some people are predicting your happiness because once they can figure it out, they can then discriminate against their happier customers. So if you and I are on an airplane that is we've just lost our flight, who should get the one seat on the next flight? And in the old days, they might give it to first come, first serve, or they might give it to the frequent flyer, which of us flew more. But nowadays, they will be predicting our pain points. And you may be more profitable, you may be the more frequent flyer, you may be more loyal, but they may give it to me because they realize I'm closer to jumping ship to another airline. Indeed, being the bigger frequent flyer might lock you in and make them more concerned that I'm at risk. So loyalty and happiness in this new world may not be all that it was cracked up to be in the past because it puts you more at risk as a consumer. Now, where this is going to shake out, there are counter strategies in places like Faircast. There's going to be crunching on the other side. But these are some issues that at least deserve some discussion. I'm also, here is a trailer for The Interpreter, a Nicole Kidman drama, thriller. And Epagogix went out and coded the script for that and made a prediction. They predicted it was going to sell 69 million at the box office, and they were 4 million off. And this is actually part of a larger experiment where they coded 9 movies and natural experience, the studio made its predictions, epagogix did neural network analysis and made their predictions. Malcolm Gladwell wrote this up initially in the New Yorker, by the way, and epagogix got it right twice as often as the studio. Studio's got 3 of the 9 predictions right. epagogix got 6 of the 9, which isn't perfect, but it's represents a lot more money on the table. And not only would they predict this movie, but they will go in and they will predict what alternative scripts would be. If you had added a sidekick, you would have made 12 million more. If you had moved it, here's also a little bit troubling, if you'd moved it to New York City and the UN and not as much in Africa, you would have made more. Location is very important. So is this the death of art? Should we be happy about this? I said generally I'm happy about super crunching on quality, but this is interfering. It leads to flattening uniformity. The authors don't have their rights. But part of me is, I'm a fan of epagogix. Let me be a little bit controversial. You know, this is in some ways promoting consumer sovereignty, which I like. And if we've had interference for years and flattening uniformity, this might lead us toward higher quality interference. So what's the future hold? The rise of super crunching is not the end of intuition, but people increasingly are going to have to be willing to put their intuition to the test. And that the best decision makers are going to start to be willing to have a dialectic where they toggle back and forth. They might start with an intuition and go to the numbers and then go back to more intuitions, but you just can't have a hunch and just fall in love with it. So in conclusion, just to make sure the big points are, the super crunchers are coming in field after field. The traditional experts are losing their discretion, and it's producing more accurate predictions. Don't get left behind in this. Certainly the people in this room, I don't have to say this to, but part of the future is to democratize this super crunching. And by the way, I am completely excited about the additional Excel add-ins that are coming. The idea that in Excel you're being able to do more and more business intelligence, more crunching stuff that's coming along in a much cruder way. I have gathered together about 30 prediction tools on specific topics, so you can go in and make a better prediction about if you're pregnant, about when your due date will be, or you can make a prediction of how long your marriage will last, or how tall your kid will be, or just tons of things. And this is a movement that needs to be brought to a broader audience. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
So since you're a law professor, I can't help but ask, have there been comparisons between statistical methods and juries, which surely face more than five different types of data points? And
yes.
Have more
Yeah.
returned?
Oh, yeah. So the jury consultants now have started to go, not all of them, but but many of them are doing number crunching to try to make predictions about how prospective jurors will vote. Yep. So very much so, but there's still way too much resistance. Actually, so my home audience of law professors and lawyers are generally still quite resistant to, they'll use it as evidence, but they won't use it to affect how they will make an argument. I was just talking to some Yale Law alumni yesterday, and they said, well, it wouldn't ever impact how I would write a brief or argue a case. And you know, if epagogix can successfully predict movie sales, could you code briefs? And now we're pretty far away from this, but I was telling somebody earlier, I have just, in a very provocative fashion, I've just coded up Stephen Colbert interview questions. And I can predict a little bit how Stephen Colbert, what kind of questions Stephen Colbert will ask. Why couldn't I do that to Justice Kennedy on the Supreme Court? Could I predict the questions that he might ask from in an oral argument? So yes, I think super crunching has been used already in juror selection, but I don't want to be too far-reaching here, but I think that there may be places where it could predict what kind of questions a justice would ask you, or what kinds of, or at least the form of the question that a justice would ask you, and maybe even on coding scripts or coding briefs. Yes, sir.
So the next step after that is to predict how the jurors will respond, and the next step after that is just, why even have the jurors? Why not just predict it all and determine at the outset whether he's guilty or innocent?
Well, and this is one of the interesting issues is, that is an excellent question, is when will we demand, for humanity's sake, to have a final human decision maker? Another place where this is definitely happening, and we see this tension, is on parole boards. Do you, we're getting number crunching to predict the recidivism risk for different people, and once you get better and better predictions, why do you need a parole board? And there is a felt need, it might be a demand, by the way, of the Constitution, that you have humans that have an escape hatch. But the sad evidence is that when you give humans the override capability, they overuse it. And that, and so the conversation always go, I can give you a example where you need an override because this statistical thing is clearly going to make a bad prediction. But then you give too broad an override, and if you then sit back and look what happened to your class of cases where they waved off the statistical prediction, time after time the overrides do worse. That you've done better even if you sacrifice this. But we have this felt need. We can't give ultimate decisions to the statistical decision algorithm. And a separate kind of empirical tendency, this is not completely established, but to the extent that you want to have hybrid models that take into account human prediction and statistical prediction, the best way to do that is not to have the statistical prediction be an input to the human decision maker, but you have the human prediction be an input to the statistics. That you actually have in one variable, how did the three radiologists code, what's their prediction, and this will give weights to the three different radiologists, and it will combine them. That will do better and put better appropriate weights. So you can sometimes get value out of human predictions, but you want the humans to be a servant of the statistics if you really want your best prediction. Yes, sir.
There was a study published or reported 2 weeks ago which looked at 500 scientific papers in one field. It said that about half of them came up with incorrect results due to faulty analysis of data. If these are the experts who are getting the analysis wrong, I wonder how that will apply to this.
So I'd love to know more about this. About half is I'm skeptical of that, but I will easily concede that super crunching does get the wrong answer sometimes. Two reactions is, one, the claim is that it is more accurate than prediction that is not statistically aided, that humans without statistics do systematically worse, but that doesn't mean that super crunching is perfect. But the other point is that resonates with this study. Super crunching needs to be much more contestable. That this summer the quant hedge funds took a beating, and I think one of the reasons is they went with, too many of them went with the genius in the corner, where we're just going, Joe really knows his stuff, and we're going to go with his predictions. And partly, they've started going too in over-reliance. This revolution is going to, I very much still love the fact that regressions tell you a measure of the precision, but you can't take that measure at face value. We need to have super crunching audits, not for legal purposes, but just to bring in other people to do this, so that this is at least one of the ways to make sure that you have multiple statistical methods trying to push in the same direction. And that's it's a good thing that we're moving in that direction in medicine. Yes, sir.
What about capturing the data? Because you talked to, I mean, none of this, all this stuff is worthless if you don't have a good, reasonable measurement for capturing the data. I was thinking of your weight chart. I mean, my brain went to, well, gosh, you could lie, but I thought, well, if your scale was hooked up to the internet, and had some kind of web service and you stepped on it, that kind of stuff. It's those kinds of inputs that you need in your daily life to be able to really get some of the value out of this thing.
I agree, and the idea of having automated capture of data with regard to weight and a webcam to make sure it's you and not somebody else. In this case, by the way, I have a third-party verifier that can call me on the carpet and challenge my weight. So we're trying to take verification seriously, but you do have to worry about manipulated or poorly captured data. But there's a chapter in my book on why now, and it's the technological breakthroughs. I actually think it's not driven so much by increases in CPU, but just increases in the ability to capture and cheaply store information. It's the fact that we got these terabytes hanging around, and secondly, that the information is just immediately captured in digital form. And it's really why, and Microsoft is on the lead on this too, we've made great progress in medicine, but the next 5 to 10 years is going to be so much better. So from a statistical perspective, most of our deceased relatives died in vain because they went to the hospital, and that entire experience was just thrown away to the rest of humanity. I mean, and I'm really perturbed by this. You know, there's a wealth of information that we just lost that we could have been profiting from, and we're about to turn the corner. And it's not, you know, and I write about these first generation of diagnostic software which basically code up journal articles. But we're going to start coding up, with the help of Microsoft's own software, we're going to start coding up entire hospital databases, and we'll be able to, I think this is going to be an appreciable increase in survivability. And so the ability to capture quality information. But to go one more point on this, part of the resistance is you got to get the physicians to be willing to have less discretion in how they code in stuff. So they right now love to dictate their own notes to what hits them, but you know, it's helpful to have a structured data set. We want to capture this information in a way that we can then use it, and there's resistance from physicians that are over 40 don't like doing it. I've been dictating this, whatever strikes me as important, and you just can't use that data as much. But that's, you know, they're not going to be around with us for that much longer, and you know, we're getting. It may even be, you know, in 5 years, in 3 years, that this stuff is really going to be a second revolution of evidence-based medicine. Yes.
I'm thinking about the relation between prediction and change. So I would presume, for example, in areas where human behavior and human taste changes slowly, for example, one generation replacing the other, it would be really, I mean, super crunching would be very beneficial. But in other areas where people change several times during the lifetime, human preferences or taste or behavior, that has to be a limiting factor. For example, like next generation video game console will win the console wars. So what other sort of limiting variables or factors can you see? Where does super crunching fall flat?
Great. So let me first just extend your view here. To the extent that there are changing preferences, you're going to need to do ongoing, you're going to increase the frequency on which you have to intervene and test more, and you're going to want to do more randomized testing on an ongoing basis. With regard to web screens, you want to continually see, well, we knew 6 months ago, we knew 2 years ago that having the smiling child gave us a lift of 20% on our click-through rates, but maybe I want to know what the new pink is for this year. And so you're going to have to keep doing it and trying to figure out maybe an important issue there is even trying to figure out some metric of how fast stuff changes, so you know what the periodicity is. But as to the limits of super crunching more generally, there are several. I'm actually disappointed my UK publisher, without consulting me, put on the subtitle, How You Can Predict Anything. And that's not, matter of fact, in the text say that's not true. That's not what super crunching is about. If you don't have historical data on an issue, you can't use regressions to do it. And if you don't have information, if you don't have quality information on what you're trying to predict, could Yale Law School do super crunching to get more successful students? Well, the hard thing is, well, what am I trying to predict? Are we trying to maximize the salary of our students? No. Are we trying to maximize how many of them become Supreme Court justices? Well, yes, but that's not, it's hard to get a summary statistic of what we want. And so if you don't have a good, if it's too fractured what success means, that's going to be a limiting factor. If it is a one-off issue, should we do a moonshot to Mars, should we do a mission to Mars, it's going to be harder to do, or are we going to, should Microsoft have a 40 petabyte server farm out in Kansas? That is such a big one-off issue. It's going to be harder to make that, or even on some product designs. But still, subparts of that, I'd think there are possibilities for randomization. And just any place, by the way, that focus groups have been used, there could be a statistical version of that I think is much more powerful. By the way, there are other limitations. There are some issues that are just not important enough to go to the trouble of super crunching on. But so I don't want to claim it's everywhere, but I want to say it's happening a lot, and there are a lot more places, especially on randomization. Microsoft should be running more randomized trials than you're running. I don't know how much you're running, but you should be doing more, okay? I would be very confident in a prediction that you're not doing enough. Yeah?
There is one limitation of super number crunching. It seems to stop short of the model. For example, your 3D position of a planet around the sun, it will not come up with a Kepler's law. This may be also related to the fact that one of the most popular tools there are neural networks, and neural networks are actually hiding, not even trying to discover what. And are there any signs that this is going to change?
Yeah, so it's an excellent point. There still is what I call the Aristotelian pull to try to figure out what the underlying truth is of things, and the neural networks. And I think the fact that the neural networks and some of the predictive algorithms are so far away from the Aristotelian, at least the regression is closer because it's trying to tease out in a way that is not hidden in the black box the individual effects. I think it's one of the reasons that academics prefer the regression approach.
When you say regression, you're referring to linear regression?
No, but it includes. Oh yeah, it would include probit and tobit and IV regression, instrumental regression. Sure. Okay. So, but I want to. No, because just because of this, because it's more black box. You can't see. If you can't see, two things, I would put outside the regression box things that don't allow you to figure out what the t statistics are on the individual causal factors, and that don't give you confidence intervals on your predictions. And by the way, a place that I'm in the dark because I'm is how much your predictive algorithms have at least started to do the second. And if you're not doing bootstrap confidence intervals on your predictive algorithms, I suggest you start. And it seems to me that's something that should be possible.
So you can do that for neural networks.
You can, but nobody.
If that's your concern.
But nobody's doing. Do you guys know if anybody that's doing bootstrap is doing that on neural networks?
People do cross validations on almost any result. That's running it 10 times, right?
Yeah, but so do they actually report that? I can't. I've never found. So I've never found one that's reported. So if it's happening, right? So good. So good. I mean, because. That makes me feel better, okay? Because or maybe it takes away one of my things to talk about. So I don't. But the big issue here is on falling short of the model is I don't think we should give, even though I say, we should put less on experience and intuition, I don't think that we should give up on the Aristotelian idea of trying to derive stuff and find the true nature of things, but that that's part of this dialectic of still trying to figure out truth. But in a lot of things where you have to decide how to treat somebody with cancer today. And if you can't figure out, or with MS, we still don't have a very good model of MS. You still got to treat them. And by God, if my mom goes in with MS, I want to know what was the experience of the last 20,000 people that went into the hospital. And we don't have that. And so I want multiple approaches, including figuring out the true underlying model.
Maybe one more question.
Sure. Or not.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much for coming.